Hi, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar on the 2024 City Clean Energy Scorecard. My name is Dave Ribeiro, and I'm the Director of Local Policy here at ACEEE. I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today, we present the city rankings and findings from the 2024 City Scorecard. The City Scorecard tracks clean energy plans, policies, and progress in 75 large cities across the country. It assesses local action to advance energy efficiency and move towards a cleaner electric grid and fuels, and do so in a manner that advances equitable outcomes. We're also joined by a panel of city officials in several standout cities. They will discuss their achievements in advancing clean energy while simultaneously lowering utility bills, improving community resilience, and reducing pollution. Next slide, please. You can go one more. So we're going to start with a couple quick housekeeping announcements. So we are recording this webinar and it will be made available to all registrants within a few business days. We are also providing a copy of the slides to everyone. To ask a question during the webinar, please add it to the Q&A button on the bottom bar of the Zoom platform. If you're a member of the press, please note that when you ask your question. We will get to questions during our Q&A segment towards the end of the webinar. You can also upvote questions that you would like us to prioritize. Finally, you can network with one another via the chat feature. With that all being said, I would like to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers. We have Stefan Samaripas, Senior Manager of Local Policy at ACEEE and lead author of the City Scorecard. Tyron Drew, Director of the San Francisco Environment Department. Jessica Price, Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the City of Madison, and Greg Nichols, Deputy Chief Resilience Officer in the Office of Resilience and Sustainability in the City of New Orleans. Thanks to each of you for being with us today. So let's get rolling. So to kick us off, I would like to introduce Stefan Samaripas. Stefan conducts research, analysis, and outreach on policies and programs that encourage energy efficiency in local communities. In addition to leading the City Scorecard, Stefan's work currently focuses on supporting local government-led clean energy initiatives and scaling up energy efficiency investments in affordable housing. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dave. All right, so I'm going to get right into giving everyone on this webinar a quick presentation on what the scorecard found, what the scorecard is all about. If you're unfamiliar with our City Clean Energy Scorecard, we are taking stock of the policies, programs, plans, projects that cities, large cities, 75 large cities to be specific, across the US are taking on to address reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing energy use. And we look at their activities across these multiple different energy sectors. You can see that on the list on the slide here. We do also look at their activities that are cross-cutting too. And so our community-wide initiatives might look at something that touches on both buildings and, let's say, community energy infrastructure, which I will mention is a new focus this year. It replaces what we had previously, which was a chapter on energy and water utilities. We still look at energy and water utilities in that section, but we're also looking at actions that cities are taking to decarbonize their buildings, their electric grid. And so we're looking at things like renewable energy deployment, things like that. So that's a quick background. To get right to the results, though, this is a look at all 75 cities that we looked at in this scorecard, where they fell in terms of their rankings. In taking stock of all the city activities that we do, we score those and then rank cities based on the number of points they get for the various different actions they're taking. San Francisco's number one. I'll touch on them a little bit more here in a moment. But you can see that our top 10 for the most part is relatively similar. If you're familiar with our past scorecards, relatively similar to past years. I will note that Portland jumped up into the top 10 after being just outside of the top 10 over the last couple editions or so. So a couple of highlights here. So like I said, San Francisco is the number one city ranked in our scorecard. They were also number one in the 2021 scorecard, the last one that we put out. As you might expect for being the top scorer in the scorecard, they also jumped up in a number of other rankings. So they were number one in our equity, racial and social equity assessment, and also in the transportation policy area. So a couple of things to note about San Francisco that sort of jump out as new from the last couple of years. One is that they updated their climate action plan with a new GHG commitment. That's actually something that shows up across the board with a lot of cities, a lot of new plans, a lot of new goals being set. They also upzoned or basically increased the allowance for density and more compact development in some of the single family areas of the city. I also want to draw attention, though, to not only just our number one score, but some other notable cities too, right? So Madison, which Jessica Price, who's on our webinar today, is going to speak to a little bit more, was our top ranked city in a mid-sized metro. And what we mean by mid-sized metro is that we're looking at in some cases, cities that are in metropolitan areas with less than 1 million people. And so Madison has been consistently moving up in the rankings. They're actually our most improved the last time around. They continue to improve this time, jumping up to 21st in the overall rankings after modifying their zoning code to promote more transit-oriented development and continuing to work on sort of their energy infrastructure throughout the city and passing this ordinance on lighting. Most improved, New Orleans this year, followed by Miami. Greg is with us today from New Orleans.
Stefan, are you with us? I think you might have frozen. Okay. So it looks like we might have lost Stefan here. He was getting through some of the results as folks could tell. Most improved New Orleans and Miami, that as are shown in the slide here. But maybe what we'll do is we'll skip ahead in the agenda while Stefan can join us, and we'll get to our speakers. So let me send it over to Tyrone Drew. Tyrone's leadership of the San Francisco Environment Department is historic, as he is the first Chinese American and person of color to hold the position. Appointed by Mayor London Breed in 2022, Tyrone is a key architect and driver of the city's climate strategy. Among his many accomplishments, Tyrone has led the mandate for commercial buildings to switch to 100% renewable energy. His push to eliminate fossil fuels from San Francisco's buildings and transportation is crucial to the city's clean energy transition. And Tyrone has also prioritized environmental justice. So thanks for being with us, Tyrone. I'm going to send it to you, and afterwards, Stefan, maybe we'll go back to you.
Thanks, Dave. Maybe I should start like dancing and singing to stall for Stefan to come back. First, I wanted to say thank you. It's really an honor to receive the first place ranking for the ACEEE award and to talk about my hometown, San Francisco. I think first and foremost, I'm really accepting kind of this award and also just talking about our city on behalf of an amazing cadre of people in our city, and that includes both our city government partners, our nonprofit organizations that we work with, and the public, who have been supporting us along all of our journey, including the adoption of many policies and programs that we've been pushing within our city to achieve our climate goals. As was mentioned earlier, our climate goal, as codified in our 2021 Climate Action Plan, is to become a net zero city by 2040. And this plan was the result of a multi-year effort working with community to develop this plan in a way that all of us can benefit from this transition, especially those communities that are underserved and marginalized and most in need in a lot of the benefits that come with a sustainable transition. I also want to recognize all the other cities that are represented here that are amazing cities, and also all the cities that were just recognized in the report. The ranking is the ranking. It's important to take stock of how we're doing in comparison to one another. But, we in San Francisco, don't see this as a competition. I don't think anyone sees this as a competition. This is a true partnership of all of us in our respective cities, because I know for San Francisco, we look to all of you, city leaders, for ideas and inspiration. As was mentioned, one of the main focal points for our climate action plan and all the work we do is really grounding our work on equity and environmental justice. And we continue to implement this plan and our policies with community to ensure, like I said, no one is left behind. And we know, and all of our cities know that, oftentimes during these transitions that it's can be unequally felt. And I think the intentionality we've all put behind in terms of elevating equity as a primary driver for making sure this transition is just has been key to why we've been able to maintain our success in advancing new policies that our city has moved forward with. It was mentioned a couple of the key highlights for this year around our upzoning. This is something that the entire state of California has really been leading and pushing on as well as our local leaders to ensure that affordable housing and increased housing density is part of the discussion as we talk about all of our climate action plans, because we need to have more affordable housing places to the centers of work, which reduces commute times and also reduces emissions from the transportation sector. And speaking of transportation, San Francisco has a very robust and amazing public transit infrastructure, continuing to invest in that through new bus rapid transit lanes. And, we, like every city across the nation during the pandemic, saw our riderships plummet and crash in 2020 and 2021. And we're starting to kind of dig our way out of this hole by continuing to emphasize that public transit and other low carbon forms of transit is the path forward, especially in our urban cities. And we've seen, where we put in those bus rapid transit lanes, remarkable growth and actually ridership exceeding our pre-pandemic levels. And so what that shows us is by putting that investments, by making our public transit systems quick, reliable, and efficient, the ridership will come. And we have a case in point. So while other lines are still kind of trying to struggle their way back to pre-pandemic levels, those bus routes that we have a bus rapid transit have already exceeded our pre-pandemic. So we need to continue doing that sort of investment along with our biking infrastructure and making our streets safer. We've also instituted a number of policies within our city, especially on our sustainability and climate action plan to, like I said, really put equity front and center. And so we don't do that just with words. We actually have specific policies and programs and analysis that we run all of our projects through before going through of implementation. And so we have a racial and social equity assessment tool that we use. We have task forces around each one of our sectors that we are trying to move forward as part of our climate action plan. And all of this is helping to shape the city moving together, which is ultimately needed in order to achieve our goal. And so I'll stop there because I know there are some additional questions later on. But like I said, really honored as my cat makes an appearance in the background to receive this award on behalf of the city of San Francisco. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tyrone, and congratulations for being #1 again. So at this point, I think Stefan, maybe we'll jump back to you to go over the scorecard results, and you are on the slide on most improved. So I will send it back to you.
Yeah, sorry everyone. Don't know what happened. There's a strange thing happening with Zoom. Okay, well, let me pick back up where we left off. It's talking about our most improved cities. Most improved this year was New Orleans. Most notably, a couple of things that you'll see on the slides here. They worked with the state of Louisiana to update the building energy code to something much more energy efficient, also requiring now EV chargers in a number of developments. And then Miami was second most improved in this year's scorecard, and took some work on to update its climate action plan, and then also pass a new stormwater management ordinance that can help mitigate against extreme heat. So just a couple, and I'll wrap up and then pass it back to Dave, but a couple of overall trends to note. So cities undertook, in the period that we looked at, which was over a couple of years between the 2021 scorecard and this scorecard, we recorded at least 158 new clean energy actions, meaning 158 new policies, programs, plans, projects that we could document. A couple of notable things. as Tyrone mentioned, we're seeing that a lot of the new activities, an increasing share of those new activities are focused on racial and social equity. One of the things, though, that still is not receiving a lot of attention across the board, some in some places, but not a lot, is that there still is not a ton of focus on adopting policies, programs, or projects that are equity-driven. Still a lot more focus on equity-driven planning, maybe setting up evaluation procedures of some kind, but still a lot of work to actually sort of take those commitments and take those plans and then put them into action, right? So that's still something to focus on for the future. And then notably this year, we saw a lot of activity in the transportation sector, or the last couple of years anyway. Which is notable because the last time around, we had actually highlighted this as a need in the previous scorecard. A lot of planning, a lot of goal setting. Still definitely a need and opportunity there to see more action in this regard. And notable, I think that you look at what we found, only San Diego is we found to be on track to achieve its transportation GHG goal. So thinking about the future opportunities for city clean energy action, obviously, as I just mentioned, there's definitely a need for more action in terms of passing policies, programs, getting projects off the ground that address racial and social equity and advance clean energy at the same time, particularly in the building sector is a big need for this. When you talk about the building sector, one of the things that also jumps out is that there's a need for requirements like building energy performance standards, kind of policy, that mandates that folks who own buildings, especially some of the larger buildings that we see in cities, like office buildings or apartment buildings, work to make improvements that actually reduce the carbon footprint of those properties. We have a handful of cities that have mandates like this in place, but there's still a lot of opportunity for more of those policies to be adopted. And we've seen before that those can make a big impact in terms of emissions. And then finally, just mentioned San Diego was our only city that we found to be on track for its transportation GHG emission goal. There are a lot of folks that there are a lot of cities that don't have goals. Even those that do have goals, they may not be tracking progress towards them. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of making commitments around transportation. That's really important because transportation is notably across the United States a sector of GHG emissions that is growing and increasing over time, right? So with that, I will send it back to Dave and answer any questions at the end.
Great, thanks a bunch, Stefan. So now we're going to go back to our speakers from cities. So next up, we'll hear from Jessica Price. Jessica is the Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the City of Madison. Her priorities include energy and efficiency solutions to meet Madison's ambitious goals of 100% renewable energy and net zero carbon emissions by 2040, investments in equitable, low-carbon transportation and city fleet vehicles, and improving the energy efficiency of affordable housing and commercial buildings through programs and policy initiatives. Jessica, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dave. I'm Jessica Price. I am in sunny Madison, Wisconsin. And I'm really excited to be here to, accept the recognition as, top city in the mid-sized metro. We have been working hard here at the city to advance climate resilience, mitigation, and sustainability. We're really thankful for the support and hard work of our mayor and city council in support of this work. The leadership of our colleagues across city agencies. I might lead the sustainability and resilience team, but it is really the dedication of all of my colleagues across city agencies to be walking the walk of sustainability and reducing our emissions. And we have consistent support from the Madison community for our climate action and our environmental justice work. We are incredibly inspired by the work of other cities. I think it's true that we don't view this as a competition, but a healthy, exhibition of that innovation and hard work that can happen in cities, and really the leadership that we can take to make these solutions a reality here on the ground. I'll lead with kind of two new kind of programs that we're working on that we're really excited about that are hitting the ground here in 2024. As was mentioned, transportation and buildings are the two major sources of our greenhouse gas emissions here in Madison. And we have multiple sort of approaches or tools in our toolbox for being able to reduce emissions from those sectors. So first is our bus rapid transit. So our first BRT line is going to come online here in 2024. It is made possible by federal funding from the Biden administration. We have been, as a city, thinking about bus rapid transit for a while, so it's really great to see these stations going up across the city. It's going to be an all-electric fleet, so we're going to have like 60-foot articulated buses that are going to be all electric and help drive the decarbonization of our public transit here in Madison. We have already made a lot of good progress for decarbonizing the city's fleet. We have more than 100 all-electric fleet vehicles, more than 150 hybrid electric vehicles, and we're really working hard to pilot and test some of those heavy-duty vehicle solutions, like our all-electric fire engine and some of the lower carbon fuels for some of those heavy-duty vehicles that we need to get the job done here at the city. The technology for full electrification is still developing on. And in the building space, we have a really new program here. Madison is the first city in Wisconsin to have a building performance policy. So our building energy savings program is kicking off this year. It requires large commercial buildings, 25,000 square feet and larger, to benchmark their energy use annually. And then buildings that are 50,000 square feet and larger have to tune up. And so we know that that policies in this realm are kind of ever evolving, but we're really excited to start to see how that's going to play out here in Madison and to partner with our commercial building sector and that private side to really start reducing emissions. We're really excited to kick that off. And then we have an equity-driven program for multifamily buildings as well. Our Efficiency Navigator program provides free energy efficiency and healthy home retrofits for multifamily affordable housing. That's housing that's affordable to folks that are making 80% of area median income or less here in Madison. And it's kind of full service. So folks get that, they connect with our program, they're able to get a building assessment, and then that building assessment guides the retrofits for that building to provide both energy savings and bill savings for the tenants. We're now in the third year of that program, and we were just lucky enough to get a grant from Department of Energy to help scale up that program to reach more families and parts of our community here in Madison, but also to spread that program to neighboring communities as well. So we're really excited to be able to advance that. And I will say that, we are really thrilled to be on the verge of some additional work that's going to be sort of sped up, I think, by the Inflation Reduction Act as well. And so I think we might get to touch on that a little bit later. But that's going to make all the difference for us being able to accelerate the work that we're already doing and make that go further and faster. So thanks again. Hello from Madison. Great to be here.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And again, congrats to Madison for being mid-sized city. Let's see next. Last but not least, certainly, is Greg Nichols. So Greg leads the Office of Resilience and Sustainability for the City of New Orleans, where he coordinates the strategy, funding, and implementation of the Resilient New Orleans and Climate Action Plans. Those plans include strategies to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions from energy use, transportation, and waste, as well as improve the city's ability to withstand our changing climate in order to build a stronger, more inclusive, and resilient city. Greg, over to you. The floor is yours.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and we're honored to be recognized today as one of the most improved cities in the ACEEE Clean Scorecard. Obviously, we had quite a bit of room to grow here, and I think we are happy to have achieved the growth, but we have our sights set on something higher. I just want to co-sign what both Jessica and Tyrone said, is that we certainly don't view this as a competition as well. I mean, the number of times myself or my staff have been on calls with sister cities across the country trying to learn from each other. I think we are certainly partners in all of this and working towards the same goal. The last few years have been really a time of growth for our office. Our office grew from, I would say, somewhere around 2 full-time employees to now we're up to 11 full-time employees. And so I think one of the primary reasons that we jumped this year was just capacity of our office to be able to do the reporting required, and really highlight the great work that has been done across the city. I think a few things were highlighted in the report. We had new building codes that were passed at the state level that really upped the ante. I think from 2009 to 2021 energy codes. We have EV charging stations that we worked with our council requirements to put in residential and commercial buildings. There have been a couple ordinances around the city's assets themselves. Municipal buildings are required to be LEED Gold. We have a clean fleet ordinance now. And then I think one of the most impactful things is New Orleans is one of the few cities, I think we're one of two, maybe DC being the other, that regulates our own utility here. So our city council was able to pass a renewable clean portfolio standard that, frankly, probably wouldn't have happened at the statewide level given the politics in the Deep South here. And so, we're incredibly excited about that as well. A few other things that the office has undertaken in the last couple of years. We updated our climate action plan in 2022. We set a goal for net zero emissions by 2050. And a lot of that was built on when we released that plan, a more equitable implementation. That was the city's second climate action plan, and the first one was in 2017. And in between the two climate action plans, there was another report, an equity report done by a group of community stakeholders the city participated in about how we can more equitably implement our climate action plan. And I think we've taken some great steps on that. I think the city is leading in one respect with our Gordon Plaza project. I think Stefan was talking about project-based equity ones. Well, we have one here in New Orleans where we are going to build a 6.5 megawatt solar farm on what was once an EPA Superfund site that had the city back in the 1960s had built some low-income housing there, and obviously residents had some health issues, higher cancer levels, and in the last year the city has bought out 65 out of 67 residents, and they've moved to other places, and we're getting ready to demolish those houses and start the construction of the solar farm this year. So big win both for the residents and for the city's clean energy goals. We joined the White House Building Performance Coalition in 2023. We've brought on some staff to pass step one, which is a benchmarking ordinance this year, and we're hoping in 2024 that will pass and will help our ranking next time. And then long term, we are looking for a building performance standard coalition or building performance standard ordinance here, which I think would put us as the first in the South, unless Atlanta beats us to it. So that's a big goal of ours. And then I would just say, to wrap up here, another big initiative that has kind of been spurred was the city's experience through Hurricane Ida. It landed on the same day as Katrina somehow, and the city's levees held. We didn't flood in the same way we did, but we did experience a catastrophic power outage. And I think out of that came a big movement for more grid resilience. And we've had some community-based organizations move to put solar and battery on houses of worship and restaurants. And now the city has plans to do that on our own buildings as too. And so there's been a real movement to have more equitable distribution of clean energy that can provide resilient sources in the time of power outage, which is a big issue with us here, not just for hurricanes, but honestly, we have sunny day outages here in New Orleans. So those are the big things that we've been working on, and I'm excited to talk more in a little bit with some of the question and answers.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. And big appreciation for everyone on the panel. It's always inspiring to hear the stories of what cities are doing on the front lines to innovate and move forward. And to everyone's comments, I know this is a ranking of cities from 1 to 75, but just to hear the way all cities work together and learn from each other is always wonderful to hear. Okay, now we're going to move into the panel discussion portion of the webinar. So I'm going to start with a question or two from me, and then we're going to have the Q&A with the audience. So for folks who are listening in, please keep submitting those questions. If you see the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom bar, just click that open and you can add your questions in there. So if everyone could turn their cameras back on. We'll start our discussion. And I'd like to start the discussion with something that's, a pretty hot topic these days, federal funding. So I'm sure the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act have been on your radar for the past few years. Jessica, you already brought this up in your comments a bit. So I'd like to go through and hear, if folks could discuss how bill and IRA funding has had an impact in your city. And if it has, share a specific project that has advanced as a result. So maybe we'll go in the reverse order of the speaking comments. So maybe Greg, we'll start with you and then go to Jessica and Tyrone.
Sure. I guess people might get tired of my voice then, but no, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, IRA and bill have been a game changer. I think everybody recognizes this is just an unprecedented level of federal funding that's available out there, and I think it's taxed everybody from the federal agencies themselves to states to municipalities like us in terms of going after them. And the way we've approached it is we set up a task force, like a multi-department task force that's housed within my office that tracks every federal funding opportunity out there. We took the city's capital budget plans and requests and tried to match what city departments needed with those funding opportunities, as well as the outside funding or outside groups that we work with as well, because of course the city isn't always an eligible applicant for the first one. So we've had a really great success. I mean, I would say fortunately, unfortunately, that most of the city of New Orleans, 60% of it qualifies as a disadvantaged community. And so we score really well on a lot of the metrics that the Biden administration is looking to fund, which is been great for us. I think we've gotten 13 grants over the last 18 months, some $70+ million. And I would say, I think one of the questions he asked Dave was like the specific project that's advancing. I think that just to go back to the Resilience Hub thing, I think we're pairing, there was a GRIP funding that went to the state of Louisiana that for resilience hubs across the state of Louisiana. And so we're going to get some funding out of that to do it. We're also looking to use our Hurricane Ida CDBG funding. That I know that's not IRA or bill funding. And then we also, I think I saw a question in the chat about CPRG. We again put another ask into the CPRG program for solar on our city buildings. So, in the next 2 to 3 years, we're planning to have somewhere between 15 to 30 buildings acting as resilience hubs. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the federal funding. And then a lot of our partners, the community-based organizations that I mentioned, have also tapped into those resources as well. So I think, the federal funding that's out there, it's not just benefiting, cities as an entity, it's also benefiting community-based organizations. And I think the Biden administration really can be lauded for their efforts to make sure that those groups are aware of it, they have the support they need, and we're doing everything we can at the city level to support them as well.
Great, thank you, Greg. Jessica, over to you.
Oh, thanks. Where to begin with the avalanche, in a good way, of opportunity here that's being provided from the federal level. I think one of the first projects that we had that was funded through the Inflation Reduction Act is to install a network. It's a grant from the EPA to install a network of air quality monitors throughout the city of Madison. We know at a sort of everyday level that most of our air quality issues are stemming from transportation here in Madison, though we are experiencing for the first time, especially during wildfire season, we'll have days of very poor air quality. So we know that we're facing new challenges as well as trying to deal with the existing challenges for air quality. And one of the things that we really wanted to be able to understand was that variation of air quality across different neighborhoods, so that we could take a strategic and targeted approach to improvement, and really understanding if we have inequities and exposure to air quality here that could be contributing to what we know are health disparities, especially in cardiovascular and respiratory health. And so that project we're just about to start installing. We led a pretty extensive community engagement effort to understand and get input from neighborhoods across Madison about where to install these monitors and what the priorities of Madisonians are in terms of measuring air quality. So we're just about to get to start installing those monitors, and that data will be publicly available. So in the short term, folks will be able to have a better source of air quality information to keep themselves and their friends and neighbors and families safe during times of poor air quality. And we can start to understand these spatial differences and trends over time. So we're really excited about kicking off that project. We also got really good news at the state level recently. So Madison is going to receive Solar for All funding. The city of Madison and a lot of other entities from our community-based partners, other nonprofits, other cities and municipalities really came together at the state level to develop what has turned out to be a very strong application. We felt really good about it when it was submitted and are really excited about the opportunity to bring solar access to low and moderate income folks here in Madison. That's the primary recipients of these of that funding, and it'll benefit Madisonians and folks all across the state at a level that we just frankly could not do without that funding. And so we're really excited about that. And direct pay is a big deal for us. We have a goal of reaching, we just got our 2 megawatt milestone here in Madison for solar installed at city facilities. So we have 2 megawatts now. We want to get to 10 megawatts by 2030. And so, and that sort of maxes out the space that we have to install solar. So that's where our goal comes from. And direct pay is going to make a big difference in us meeting that goal, perhaps ahead of schedule. And we're really excited about that opportunity as well. We have a few irons in the fire. Congratulations, Greg, on your success for getting all of that federal funding. That's really exciting. And it's been a great opportunity for us to have very grounded conversations with our community-based partners. You know, we do a lot of work here in Madison, partnering with community-based organizations to inform and implement our programs. And this has helped us have more targeted conversations. And so whether or not we get a grant, we have built a foundation for moving that project forward. We might not be able to go as big or as fast as if we had federal funding to do it, but we now have really clear pathways on a lot of our initiatives and projects on what we need to be doing in our community to advance these programs in an equitable way and be really responsive to the needs and desires of our community in a way that I don't think federal funding has played that role in a way whether or not you get the dollars. And I think that's just a really powerful bonus for all of the work that they're putting in to get that money down to communities.
That's wonderful to hear. So many positives. I think I lost count. But Tyrone, why don't I send it over to you to wrap up this question?
Yeah, and similarly, I think I want to echo what both Jessica and Greg said around, the IRA and also bipartisan law being really transformative and really being the first time there's been this massive infusion of federal resources. We've all applied for like little grants here and there from multiple different federal agencies, but to see kind of this coordination and this infusion of really large sums of funds that can help change our communities has been tremendous. And from a large scale, we've seen this affect kind of just purchasing habits, right, around electric vehicle purchases. And so we look to our new vehicle registrations here in San Francisco, we're at like 37% are zero emission or electric vehicles at the moment. And year over year, if you look over the last 3 years, it's increased, and it went from 5% to 6%, and then all of a sudden the tax credit became available, and now it's 10%. It was a 10% jump, right? So it really does have this impact and catalytic impact on public kind of choices. As far as specific projects that we've received funding for, I'll just highlight 2 quick ones. One, we got about $14 million to do tree plantings to improve the number of plantings predominantly within our underserved communities, and which if most cities are probably like San Francisco, where you kind of do an aerial view of where there are trees and where there's nature, you can pretty much see most of the gaps are in underserved communities of color, and that's no different in San Francisco as well. And so we're turning that $14 million into advancing what we have a street tree nursery program where we're creating green jobs and creating union labor jobs out of this program to then give people careers in kind of urban forestry. And that's going to be transformative just from a job standpoint, and then also in actually planting these trees in these communities that don't have the resilience that other neighborhoods have, as well as the other health benefits that come along with tree plantings. The other grant I'll just highlight from an equity standpoint is, we got an environmental justice grant from the EPA to advance an initiative we're calling kind of our climate equity hub within the city. And so we know that one of the biggest challenges around building decarbonization is kind of going behind the meter into people's homes and telling them, hey, we need to get you off natural gas. It's a really tough conversation. And it's an even tougher conversation when it's government telling you you have to take out your natural gas from your homes. And so similar to kind of how we've constructed our climate action plan, we're kind of working through this hub model to partner with community organizations to actually lead those efforts within their neighborhoods. And so we're using that funding to create an incentive and workforce kind of pathway into these neighborhoods and allowing them to lead these efforts respectively and kind of playing more of a coordination role between all of the organizations. And we think this is going to be the key to really focusing on kind of our low income and underserved households that also need to take part in the building decarbonization transition.
Great. Thank all of you. Big thanks. And yeah, it's still my head is spinning a little bit just in terms of all of the positives I'm hearing in terms of resilience hubs, air quality monitoring, equity hubs. So it really does seem this funding has been transformational. So that's been wonderful to hear. So I did have another couple questions, but the questions are really coming in. So I'm going to move into some audience questions at this point. We did have a question that was related to CPRG. So climate pollution reduction grants. And so there's a question around whether each of the cities went through and had to update its climate action plans if you each were interested in CPRG, if you had to go through and update climate action plans, and if you did so for the implementation grant. So I will let anyone answer that one who might be interested.
I'm happy to take a stab at that one,
Great.
Dave. We're a C40 city, so we, as a part of our membership there, we're required to update our climate action plan every 5 years. As it relates to CPRG, we mostly just worked with our MPO, the Regional Planning Commission here, to make sure all of the actions and ideas that we had in our own climate action plan got included in theirs, because we had to either reference the local one or the state one, and luckily here in Louisiana, the previous administration, which was the Democratic governor here, had gotten in their climate action, what is it, PCAP, I believe, in before the transition happened, because our new governor is not a climate supporter, I guess is the best way to say it. And so, we were able to reference either of those plans, but really we just made sure that the ideas that were in our current climate plan were included in those planning processes, and then we were able to apply for the implementation grants.
Perfect. Thank you. Jessica or Tyrone, anything to add?
No, we didn't. Similarly, we didn't have to update our climate action plan. I think the biggest, I wouldn't say challenge, it was just the work was really partnering across the region. We're not really set up in the San Francisco metro area. We have a couple of different regional agencies that cover different areas around transportation, around plannings, and so getting kind of this regional kind of stitching of for the CPRG was a little bit of an undertaking. But we did do it on a regional basis to make sure that we could apply for funds, and the focus for our proposal was really around large neighborhood scale kind of electrification. And I think that's something we're noticing as we want to decarbonize, right? It's great to go home by home, but we have to start looking a little bit bigger in terms of neighborhood scale transformation, both from a utility standpoint and from just a planning standpoint for the transition. So that's the crux of the proposal we put forward.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and Madison joined several other local governments in partnership with the state of Wisconsin. So the state did a statewide PCAP and grant application that would sort of benefit all of us. So it's sort of a high water raises all ships sort of situation for us.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. So we have a bunch of other questions here, some specific to cities, some more general. I'll take another general one and then get into some of the specifics. This one is about climate action planning and setting goals. So do you account for scope 3 emissions when setting climate action goals? And if so, could you explain that process a bit? So I guess question to anyone on the panel, whether scope 3 emissions are accounted for in climate action goals. Go for it, Tyrone.
I'll start off. We do have consumption-based goals within our climate action plan, which kind of was one of our big kind of pushes this go around in 2021, knowing that we need to start looking at supply chain and kind of larger consumption issues. And so we did incorporate that. A lot of the work we're doing right now is similar to what everyone is faced with in terms of like tracking those total scope 3 emissions, because it gets really, really complicated really fast. And, you know, it can be an endless kind of data mining exercise. And we also want our plan to be tangible. And so a lot of the things we're putting forward now is around collecting that data so we can make an informed decision of like how we're going to tackle this from a metrics-based target on scope 3. And it's no different than, you know, companies that are trying to figure out how to decarbonize their own operations, right? It's complicated to keep going back through the supply chain to where their products are produced and manufacturing, but it can be done. And, you know, we recently passed a policy for all of our municipal government buildings that we have to now report on our embodied carbon as we're doing kind of upgrades and construction. That was one of our big changes that we wanted to move forward as part of our climate action plan, so that we can have that data from a city standpoint to show just within building construction what that embodied carbon like emissions looks like, and then start figuring out the emissions tactics afterwards.
Perfect. Great. Jessica or Greg, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say scope 3 emissions we're as part of our inventory process, we do look, I think the way the GPC protocol works is we've got basic and basic plus, and we do measure some scope 3 emissions, but I would say it hasn't been our primary focus yet. But now as our membership with C40, they do have some requirements about setting consumption-based goals. So, you know, I think we've been in conversations with them and trying to do some sector specific planning around that. So, you know, we have a EPA grant from the Swiffer program, and we're going to do a solid waste master plan there. And I think likely coming out of that, we'll have some consumption-based goals to kind of reduce waste in the city. And yeah, I mean, the supply chain parts, I co-sign what Tyrone said. I mean, you can get into a hole there pretty quickly, I think. So I do think, you know, trying to make those goals tangible for like the general public, I think is a big, you know, it's not going to be a motivator if the public doesn't really understand the goal. So yeah, we don't currently have scope 3 goals in our climate planning process, but I think we will in the near future.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we're in a very similar boat. We're actually in the process of getting our latest emissions update for the city. It had been a little while before the city had undertaken a greenhouse gas inventory, and so we're actually going to get our 2018 and 2022 inventory numbers out pretty soon, so we can do a better job of tracking. And so once we kind of have our feet under ourselves there, we'll be able to move on to scope 3. But right now we are also focused on scope 1 and 2.
Got it. Makes sense. Great. Okay, next up, I have a few questions for you, Stefan. We got quite a few questions in the Q&A about how specific cities could improve. So Rochester was mentioned, Denver, as well as Cleveland. So maybe we could take a step back and could you share with folks perhaps some general approaches for how cities who want to move forward could potentially do that, and any resources that could be available from City Scorecard for individual cities?
Well, so, you know, I mean, I mentioned in my remarks there are 3 sort of overall areas to think about as far as, you know, next steps and actions. But I guess, you know, one of the things that it's important to keep in mind in terms of thinking about what to do next as a city is thinking about sort of who you are and sort of, you know, what the context is that you're working with. And that's one of the things that we've tried to address more and more in our city scorecard. We developed, this started with the last edition of the city scorecard. We developed a typology of cities. So we took all the cities in the scorecard and we broke them out into groups based off the size of their metropolitan area, the population size of their metropolitan area, and also the rate at which they're growing within their own boundaries as a city in terms of population, or not, maybe in some cases. And so, you know, I mean, if you're a city that is maybe on the smaller side or in a smaller metro area, and you you know, are, you know, maybe not seeing a ton of growth. One of the, just as a way of example, you know, one of the things that we recommend broadly for those cities is to think first and foremost about your own operations, right? Your own municipal work, what you're doing in terms of managing energy use in your facilities, in your vehicle fleet, right? And then think about partnerships that you have that may be a good starting place for building larger initiatives, right? So work with your local utilities if possible, work with community groups to create incentive programs, create financing programs that promote clean energy. For those on the larger side, or, you know, especially those in rapidly growing cities in big metropolitan areas, you might think more about you know, sort of making sure that you're focused in on transportation emissions specifically. You know, as I mentioned, one of the things that jumps out across the scorecard, it's not a lot of transportation specific greenhouse gas emission commitments. And so there can certainly be more of those. And if you're in, you know, a large growing city, you're going to have a lot of traffic. There's going to be a lot of, you know, economic activity that's driving all that. And so thinking about transportation emissions is going to be really important, because those are going to be jumping off the page if you're looking at, you know, your emissions data. And so, you know, everything from thinking about investing more in electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, you know, providing incentives for folks to get access to those vehicles, especially low-income communities and communities of color that have historically had, you know, challenges in accessing that sort of infrastructure. That's really important. Also, you know, we've talked a little bit about it today, but, you know, updating your zoning code. So you're thinking about how development is being laid out in the city. If you're growing a lot, think very carefully about ways in which you can incentivize folks to live near where they work and to the places that they need to go to. And just to mention, as far as our resources go, you know, we have specific city one-page fact sheets that are up on the landing page that have a quick snapshot of some of the key activities that are happening in cities locally, and then also a number of recommendations for each city on what they can do next in terms of thinking about clean energy action. And then you can explore, you know, more information about those typology groups that I mentioned. We have a data dashboard, a Tableau data dashboard that you can play around with and see sort of where the data lies. And obviously we've got the report itself. And then I'll also mention we have a policy database, which lays out a lot more specific information on all the policies and activities that are happening at the city level in these 75 cities that we look at. It includes the links to websites and additional information where you can find out more about some of the projects and the programs that are being launched. And I'm happy to drop that in the chat. I'm not sure that, I think our landing page doesn't have that right maybe at the top, but I'll make sure that that's in the chat for everyone to access, because that really does give a nice summary and a nice detailed summary of what's happening at the local level.
Great. Thank you, Stefan. There's a few more questions in the chat that touch on states. So I sort of want to move from what a city could do to working within the context of a state. So maybe could the panel speak to its relationship in terms of working with the states you're locating in with as a partner and moving together in terms of city-state partnerships? And maybe I see Greg, you coming off mute, so why don't you go first?
Yeah. I guess ours is probably more unique maybe than some of the other ones. I mean, we're in the Deep South, and until January of this year, we had 8 years of a Democratic administration, launched the first statewide climate action plan in the Deep South. Made significant commitment to renewable energy here, and I think was great to see that progress here in the South. We now have a new governor, and I think we have a extremely conservative state legislature. And so I saw some questions around, preemption, and we certainly have that. Like we have a natural gas ban. The city cannot regulate natural gas usage in buildings here. And so, when we joined the White House Building Performance Standard Coalition, we got connected with the Institute for Market Transformation, and they've done a lot to help us in terms of legal resources about what are the parameters and how can we shape our legislation in terms of regulating buildings in light of that preemption. And so I think a future building performance standards probably will just set goals for like site EUI in the building. And so just make it such a way that getting rid of natural gas is kind of maybe the only way that they could meet those goals down the road. But I think we're going to have to be really careful around the messaging and how we do that legally here. It's certainly going to be a tricky tightrope for us to walk.
Definitely understandable.
Yeah.
Jessica, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say that in some ways we're in a similar boat to Greg in terms of preemption for some of the work that we would like to do. Our energy code, for example, is set at the state level, and local governments have no control over that. And we are also limited. The other flip side is if you can't regulate, then incentives are always good. But of course, we have limited resources here at the local level often to provide some incentives that would be more on the financial end. So we do a lot of structural incentives. So we kind of think of these creative solutions of how we can use zoning, how we can use structural incentives, attach strings, sustainability strings to our local government support for new developments. For example, with our affordable housing fund, we have sustainability requirements that folks need to meet for those. Anytime that we're offering city support or city land, we try to make sure that what is going to be built there in the future is meeting the sustainability standards that we would like to see everybody meeting. And so it does require some creative solutions when you are preempted from doing some of the things that are, I think, the most direct route to some of the outcomes that we want. But there are other places that we do get to collaborate at the state level. There are lots of, I think Solar for All is going to be a good example of, a statewide program. We also have our statewide energy efficiency program focus on energy. So we do a lot of collaborating with them as well. And so when it comes to the policy piece is a little trickier, but the implementation piece, I think there's often a lot of ways to collaborate and work within the bounds that we have, because I think state agencies are also feeling that too. Oftentimes they're wanting to get to the same ends and are also having to figure out how to navigate those. And so we sort of try to do that together.
And I obviously, coming from California, probably have a different kind of landscape here where oftentimes the state is leading on a lot of kind of progressive environmental issues, and so there's very good alignment. And so we're fortunate. I always tell my team and people, like, we're in a little bubble here, and so we have that responsibility because we have this runway, if you will, to try to lead as much as possible because we have the ability to do so, and we're not kind of preempted in most cases by the state. And the state is actually pushing the cities to move faster, right? Because the cities are essentially the touch point closest to kind of community implementation for all of our cities, right? So the state relies on us to be able to lead on these issues and almost pilot test, like, what works, what doesn't work, and then bring that up to the state level and then become state legislation. So that's usually the path in California, where a city like San Francisco will really go out there and try really progressive all electric policy for new development, and then later on, a few years later, you'll see it translate into a statewide policy across the board, because they'll be able to take the lessons we learn from our implementation and hopefully make it better for the rest of the state.
Great, and also a great example of local leadership in terms of going at the local level first and having it expand upward. But we are about 60 minutes went by really fast. We still have some questions, but for ones that are specific on cities, the ACEEE team can follow up after the event. So I think we'll need to leave the Q&A there. Thank you so much to all of the panelists and for the audience for participating today. As I mentioned at the top, everyone will be sent a link with the recording as well as the slides within the next few business days. So again, thank you so much to the panel. Really enjoyed the conversation, and have a great day, everyone.